Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of Literature of the Child. So I'm sorry we're not meeting again today, but I'm having a few little symptoms and I'm hoping it's nothing, but I didn't want to be around you all yet. So hopefully we'll be able to get back face to face. Well, not next week, because next week is a holiday, it's Monday. So that would get us to the following week, which I think is the 14th or right around there. So we're going to do the next couple weeks online, and I'm just going to talk with you a little bit about it and hopefully get you settled, and then we'll be back to normal hopefully in a few weeks. I'm really hoping. So anyway, thank you everyone who reached out to me and asked how I was doing. I really appreciate it. I'm doing okay. My sister tested positive on Friday. So out of the 5 of us, that's 2. My mom and I are just feeling a little off, but haven't had a positive test yet, thank goodness. So just trying to write it out, and I'll be clear on Sunday. That'll be 14 days. So we'll know then. So I really appreciate you guys checking in with me. It's so nice of you all. I really, really thank you for your kindness. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about our material. So last week we were able to read the article Engaging Apolitical Adolescence by Melissa Ames. And hopefully you liked that article. It's one that I really like. It's become kind of a cornerstone of a couple different things and a couple different philosophies that I work with within classrooms. We talked about it a little bit last week, but I really like her ideas. And I value her concept of engagement and engaging students, and how to engage students, and then how to take these really socially charged dystopian works and then make them applicable or make them into social justice issues for the classroom. And I think she really does a good job of, explaining a whole bunch of them, and also talking about how that works. And so I really value that work. I felt like the blogs and vlogs have been really good, and the grades will be up for those in the next day or two. I'm working on them. And so I'm really thinking the work looks great that you guys are coming up with, and I appreciate you turning them in. If for some reason you didn't get to turn something in, just reach out to me and let me know what's going on. I know that it's, again, another kind of fluid semester, even though the powers that be are have lost a little of the flexibility that we typically do, right? With being able to drop a little bit later, and the grade situation has gone back to pre-COVID. So it's a little more stringent, but I want to be here to support you. So if something's going on, I'm pretty flexible and reasonable if you just let me know what's happening. So anyway, going back to the material. So we move on this week and next week, which kind of works really well, into the Hunger Games and Catching Fire. And I'm sure you're familiar with these narratives, right? You've probably either read them or watched them before, so they're not necessarily going to be new to you. I meet very few people that aren't experienced in them in some way. But however, this time, instead of, sitting back and watching the movie from the positionality of entertain me, I'd really like you to, dig a little deeper and look at these narratives now with the idea of, what's in here, and how could they become a learning tool, or how could they how could students identify social justice issues, or what social justice issues are identifiable, within the material. Looking at them from a more critical lens, right? Not from a necessarily filmmaking lens, although that's really fun too. This isn't a film class. We're still looking at the narrative, right? Like the story. What is the story saying? What is it? How is it a reflection of our society today? And unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not really sure. When I built my dystopian classes, I have a science fiction class I teach too. These storylines seem a little more far-fetched, but kind of as time has gone on and our world has changed, it has definitely begun to feel more real. And that maybe some of the things that Suzanne Collins is addressing within these narratives is really quite applicable to our world today. and really help us to exemplify, situations that we're facing. One thing that I'm sorry, different article. One thing that Ames says in engaging apolitical adolescence is she says, students turn to these dystopian narratives because they can grapple with real world problems in the safe confines of fiction. And I think that's super important to remember, that there's just a little bit of a distance when you're reading a narrative, right? Or watching a movie. Although I would argue that there's more distance in reading the narrative than watching the movie. But either way, it's not like really looking at the news. Although it has elements that we'll watch these movies and it'll sound just like our news today. But it's just that degree of separation. It's the safe confines of fiction that Melissa Ames is addressing, right, in this material. And so I think she's on to something here, right? And that we can then take a look at these materials, Hunger Games, Catching Fire, these two movies, and begin to think about how they're doing that. And so let's stick with the Hunger Games first, because we're going to deal with this week, where you get introduced to Katniss, and there's some things that kind of come up right away. Her age, the poverty that she's living in, segregation of males and females, young girls and boys. There's so many different things. Hunger, definitely. Government control. There's so many social justice issues that we face, and we'll continue to talk about other ones, but you can begin to really look within this movie and think about how students can engage with this material, and then really be able to think about real world life problems and how those real world life problems are connected together with this narrative. And I think that's what good fiction does, right? Is for years there was a theory around that said that you could only analyze fiction within the text of the pages, right? That you could never look at beyond the page of the text, right? And then there's this interesting theorist that came around named Wolfgang Iser, and he was very interested in reader response theory. And he brought the premise out that the meaning of the text, right, the words, or you could use the film in this case, is somewhere in between the words and the person who's watching, right? The meaning is made somewhere in the middle. And that makes literature really interesting. Because then you can start to connect it to bigger issues and bigger things that we're facing, and realize that it's the things that we bring to it in our experiences, right? That it's not written in a vacuum, that really good works of literature we find are connected to times of political upheaval within countries, or things that are happening within their own lives that they then are starting to, to research and get interested in. So I find that a lot of times we think of literature as just these stories, but if we start to think of them connected to history and start to think about connected to the time that they're made, then they become something different, right? They also become a reflection of the society that they were built in. If you listen to interviews of Suzanne Collins, you'll hear things like she was watching the news and there was some footage on Afghanistan, and then she was flipping channels. And she was also watching Survivor. Remember that show, Survivor? I think it's still on. And she was struck as she was doing this, that there were such similarities between the footage of war and this game Survivor, right? And so she talks quite a bit about how this, narrative came to play, and it came through these connectors, and how distressed she was that this game Survivor was mimicking this idea of war as she was watching it. So they're not created in a vacuum, these pieces of literature, and they really can speak to our world. And I do think, as Melissa Ames suggested, that they can then reach out to students, right, and help them to start to think about some of the things that we're looking at within our world today. So that's what I would like you to do with this blog or vlog is, investigate some of those ideas. What's happening in the narrative? How does it relate to the world today? How could it engage students? How could you use it within your field, right? How can you use narratives within your field? For so many years, literature has been really kind of brushed off as a value, but we know that um, that we do learn from these narratives, and that they become a reflection of our society and the way that we think. So I would like you to kind of investigate that. You can definitely go back and talk about Ames. You can address any of these ideas within the narrative, within your blog and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you find and what you dig up. I see so many interesting things within this narrative, from clothing to relationships to violence to poverty. So many things that you could send students on, a research project on, or get them involved in. So anyway, these are some thoughts that I have. These are not the only thoughts, of course. This is just some ways, excuse me, for you to consider the narrative and the material and start thinking about how it would work and how it would work in your field of study. I hope that you're doing well and that this sounds interesting to you and engaging to you. I'm pretty sure you'll not be too sad about watching the Hunger Games over again. And then I'll check back in with you next week and we'll talk a little bit about Catching Fire and a little bit how that changes once we spend some time with Katniss this week. All right, you all, have a good week. If you need anything, please reach out. I am really doing my best to get back with you all within 24 hours of you responding. I'm here to support you and help you, so make sure you stay in communication if you need me. All right, take care, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye-bye.